Okay, everybody. So I think we'll get underway. A few people still coming in, but we'll start with the introductions. Firstly, my name is Richard. Very nice to meet you all virtually. And I'll be hosting today's webinar. Let me start off just by sharing my screen. And hopefully we can all see my slide deck coming up. If Louisa, perhaps from my team, is able to confirm that you can both see my screen and hear me in the chat window, that'd be great. And welcome everybody to our first ever tea break webinar. We're really excited to introduce this new training series for you. We hope you're going to find it really, really valuable. And we think we've got a great opening session to start with. I hope, like me, you've got a nice cup of tea. And if you can see my sort of Tintin mug here, I'm going to try and not put you off with too much distracting slurping of my tea, but I'm all set and ready to go. So as it's our first ever webinar in this series, I just wanted to give you a little introduction to what this is all about, where we're pitching it, what we're trying to achieve, and so on. Firstly, we wanted to introduce it because we recognize that Flourish is really a big beast of a platform. There's a whole huge amount you can do with it, a lot of different varied use cases and scenarios. And we recognize that that's a learning journey for all of our clients, and we want to turn it into a journey that we can take you on. So we want to break down this Flourish training into as many component parts as we can, and we've decided to present this to you as an ongoing weekly series at the same time every Tuesday. We're pitching this at a beginner to intermediate level, so if you're a data visualization expert or an absolute Flourish guru already, you may find this a little bit introductory for you. But based on our experience with most of our clients, we feel that this is about the right level. And as I said, we're going to try over the course of this series to give you a really comprehensive introduction to all things Flourish, right across the gamut of all the different templates we have, platform features, publishing, data visualization, best practices, and so on. And we created this series so that you could dip in and out of it depending on what content is most relevant to you. We recognize that our clients have very different use cases. Some clients use maps all the time. Some clients rarely use maps at all. If that's not relevant for you, no need to attend the webinar. But of course, if you miss anything that you did want to see, we'll be making recordings of each session available on a dedicated YouTube playlist the day after the event. So hopefully all sort of pretty straightforward. And I wanted to just sort of introduce the team behind the series. Here in the top left, that's me. Many of you will know me as I'm often the sort of first point of entry into Flourish for new clients. We'll be changing presenters from week to week. I suspect many of you will also know Louisa from our product team, and many of you will have worked with her in the context of our priority support channel. Also, Ilias supports a great many of our clients, special expertise in helping media and newsroom clients. And not so many of you will probably know Lindsay, who's newly joined us from the Bank of England, where she was a specialist data visualization practitioner. All of that team are here on the webinar with me. They're silently in the background and they're there and happy to answer your questions. So just use the chat box there to chat to them. Hopefully, you know, we're a small team here at Flourish. These are people you're going to be working with on a regular basis. Use this opportunity to build a relationship with people. Ask any questions that you like there, and if the team can head them off, they will do. And above all, from all of us, just a big thank you for setting aside your really valuable time for Flourish. And we are all here on this session to try and help you make the most of that time, and that's going to be the case every week. You know, we want to deliver great content that really empowers you to do better work with Flourish. Okay, so on to today's session, which I'm calling Introduction to the Line Bar Pie template. And I thought I'd just say a little bit about why we've chosen this as our starting point. And really this template is something I call your kind of bread and butter. It's likely to fit most of your common use cases, has a relatively simple data structure. It probably aligns with the type of data visualization that you're creating already. So very relevant from that perspective, but also, and I hope you'll get a sort of sense of this from today's session, that mastering this template and really understanding some of the things that you can do with it is actually one of the easiest ways to really up the quality of your data visualization output and impress people with your work. You know, even more so than some of our much more kind of complex templates. And because there's so much sort of depth and richness to the single template, and because it's so widely used by our clients, over the coming weeks, we're going to be breaking that down into more in-depth looks. Today is an introduction and an overview, and an attempt by me really to sort of contextualize something important about the template that I think is very important to your understanding of Flourish overall. So what we're going to be looking at is trying to explain to you why we've only got this one template, but it's got all these different chart types all joined together in it. Why is that? And I hope you leave here with a better understanding of that. A couple of little gotchas to watch out for that I think will make your life easier when working with this template. I'm going to briefly cover a new feature, really powerful in the template, with filters and controls, and show you how that can be used. Briefly, hopefully orientate you in the concepts of using a single chart or a grid of charts, and some light ideas as to when you might want to use those. Highlight another new feature, which is the ability to order your data. Okay, so multiple charts in one. What is this really all about? Well, all of you will know, I'm sure, that many Flourish visualizations are animated, and it's one of the things that people most love about them. But the animation isn't just about sort of simple movement on the page. Yes, the movement on the page is very eye-catching, but it's really about a specific data visualization best practice, which is this idea of object constancy. So what is object constancy? Well, it's a graphical element that represents a particular data point that can be tracked visually through the transition. This lessens the cognitive burden by using pre-attentive processing of motion rather than sequential scanning of labels. So the movements that you see within Flourish animations are meaningful, and they're designed to help you understand what any given data series is, what a change in that data series is, where it exists relevant to other metrics that you're looking at the same time. And you can almost think of animation as just another one of the tools that you have available to you to increase your audience's rapid understanding of the insights you're trying to present to them, just as, say, using color in charts is another way of rapidly increasing your audience's understanding. And that's really because Flourish is all about trying to get you to move just beyond the concept of sort of charts and static visuals and towards sort of data storytelling. And that's why I really sort of wanted to take time to orientate you in that today. So I've just created an example to walk through some of that, so that those of you who are not familiar with this already hopefully get a better idea. I've slowed the animations right down, and here you can see the type of animation that I'm sure you're very familiar with, which is the line being drawn onto the page as the visualization loads. So that immediately looks attractive. But what I want to show you now is we're going to be looking at a series of visualizations that are all based on the same data set, which is quite an interesting publicly available data set about UK fuel production. And we've got the same data set, the same template, 9-bar pie, but different visualizations because there are different things that we want to highlight. So in this first chart, perhaps what I want my audience to take away is it's very easy to see the decline of petroleum in terms of the production of fuel. But maybe my next point is to highlight how petroleum has actually stayed quite constant as a part of the total makeup of this picture. So I want to show that actually on an area chart. And as I transition there, hopefully you now see these lines move and animate into place on the different chart type. So our audience instinctively and immediately understands what's going on and where these sit in the overall picture. So I'm just going to do that transition back so you can see that again. Just watch one of these lines and you'll see it animate nicely into place. And this is the power that using these different chart styles within the same template gives us. Now those are two quite similar examples, the line and the area chart, but we can use that same concept of animation transitions as we move to, say, a column chart. So my next point might be just to focus specifically on the trend of petroleum. So I transition to my next slide. You watch that purple line fade away and the data points expand out into the columns that make up our column chart. Okay, so same principle. And then just another example of that, just going to look at a pie chart. This doesn't sort of animate directly from line or column. This is now looking at that same energy data, but we're looking at more kind of proportional view of it here. And this is specifically for the year 2019. Now, my next point here might be that we want to look at this proportional makeup in the context of other years' fuel production. So as I transition now to a view across multiple years, I just want you to look and see how this chart now animates into place, and we understand exactly where it sits in the context of the rest of the data we're now presenting to our audience. So meaningful animations that help explain our data are the key to why we use these different chart types within the same template. And I think it's sort of orientating yourself in that mindset or that paradigm can allow you to do really powerful work in this space. So a couple of things to sort of watch out for when working with this template that to always sort of be advised of are be wary of big data sets. And two things really to watch out for here. One, performance. As you can see from some of those examples, there's kind of quite a lot technically going on with the line bar pie template in terms of delivering those animations. So it's not particularly sort of built to scale in terms of large data sets, but also basic legibility. These visualization types aren't necessarily designed for very, very large data sets, and you want to make sure your charts are clear and understandable and that your viewer isn't overwhelmed with data. Another little gotcha that I wanted to point out, and I put this one in really because it was something I struggled a little bit to wrap my head around when I first started working with Flourish, and I wouldn't want you to have those sort of same struggles, is the fact that we have line charts, area charts, column charts, and bar charts in here, and they essentially all take the same data structure, but the donut and pie chart takes a slightly different data structure. So that means if you are working with the same data set but across different charts in this template, you may need to transpose your data when switching to the pie or donut style. So let me just open up my Flourish workspace and show you an example of that. I've just got some of our blueprint data here, and amounts of apples, bananas, oranges, and grapes as shown on a line chart. Now you'll see if I want, I could do that as an area chart stack percentage, and that transitions sort of very smoothly. I could do it as a grouped column chart if I want to represent the data that way, and this is all nice and coherent. We've got our years and each one represented with the value on our x-axis, or we could maybe put it to a bar chart as well. So that's all sort of fairly straightforward. When I switch to a pie or donut chart, this now seems a bit odd. This doesn't seem quite right. I haven't got my bananas, apples, and grapes up here. I've got years, and this isn't representing the proportional makeup of those I was expecting. This all seems to be data for apples for multiple years. So this is not quite what I wanted. And we'll see here as well, my values are bound to columns B and E, but actually the only values that are showing are for column B. So what I need to do is actually transpose my data. So swap my rows and columns. I can do that there. Aha. And this now looks a lot more like it should. Now you'll see here, obviously because it's a pie chart, I've only got one of them. So although my values are saying B to E, actually the only one that is bound is B. So if I change it to B to D, nothing changes. I'm going to change it to B to J. Again, you see nothing changing down here. And that's obviously because we can only represent one of these in a pie chart at any given time. But as we'll see again shortly, I can break that out then to a grid of charts if I do want all of those. So just a little tip for you there. Okay, let's go on. And I want to introduce filters and controls to you, which, as I say, are very new to the template and really powerful, and I think really going to make your lives a lot easier. It's very sort of simple to use, nice, easy concept. It can really help you tame some bigger data sets. And there are lots of cases where you do want to use this template for slightly larger data sets. Let's say, similar to an example that we're going to look at, you've got data for countries all around the world, multiple hundreds of countries. It's perhaps for COVID cases per country, and you want your audience to be able to explore that. How do you tame that? Filters and controls is going to help you. As I say, that then allows your users to easily explore data sets and find the data that they're interested in. It can allow you really to deliver a lot of insights for just a single piece of work, the preparation of a single chart. And it can be very useful within the context of stories. Now we're actually going to look at stories and line bar pie template in a separate session. So I'm just going to dip in to give you a kind of tiny idea of that today. But I wanted to show you filters and controls with a hands-on example. So we're going to go get some data from the World Bank on GDP per country or region. So it's nice, simple, straightforward data. And as you'll see here, it makes sense to represent this on a line chart. So I'm just going to go to Excel. Well, I'm just going to grab this for Excel rather. Okay, oops, a clumsy double click there. Let's go open this data up and we're going to start working with this now. Fingers crossed that all goes smoothly. I do have a backup of the data set if we have any problems. Okay, protected view. Let's just try something else here then. This is that same data set which I previously downloaded. Let's just see if we have a bit more luck with this. Okay, great. And here is our World Bank data. As you can see, quite a big data set in the sense that we've got something like 260 regions or countries, and we've got data for about the last 60 years, I think. So this is very quickly going to completely overwhelm the line bar pie template. So how are we going to work with it? Well, I'm just going to prepare my data just a tiny little bit by just taking out those three columns because they're not relevant to me. And I might as well take out, I don't need to take anything else out. I'm just going to now copy this. So Control C, copy and paste that. No, copy that rather. And let's now drop into Flourish. I want to do this as a line chart. So I'm going to go new visualization. And we're going to do a line chart. And one of the first things that I want to point out to you here, which is absolutely key whenever you're working with Flourish, is this point here, this first point. Make sure your data structure matches the blueprint. And in the case of this data, it doesn't match the structure, so the data needs transposing. Let's just refresh that. It seems to be a little bit slow. Okay, and I'm going to choose a line chart. So let me go over to my data and just show you, and whatever template you're working with in Flourish, I can't sort of emphasize how strongly enough you need to have this mentality. Look at the data structure of the template, look at your data, do they match? Okay, so in a simple terms, we've got our dates times, in this case years, down here in a single column, and it's column A. Let's look at my data. Okay, it doesn't actually look like that at all. Let's just go up to the top. And the years are all in separate columns along the top. All right, so that's something I'm going to need to attend to. I'm going to grab all of this data and I'm going to delete it. And another just handy little tip when you are working with bigger data sets is just unbind, take away any column settings that you can. And again, it's going to reduce the chance of overwhelming your data. So I'm now going to copy and paste my data in there, and those 268 countries or regions are now going to be in there, and all those sort of 60 years. To get this data in the format the template's expecting, all I need to do is a quick swap of rows and columns. And this is quite a bit of data that might take a second, but hopefully that should work. There we go. Okay, and now this looks much more like the data provided with the blueprint, so that's good. Now in a second, I'm going to want to bind these columns B, and it goes all the way through to, because I practiced this already, JE. But what I want to do first is go through to this controls and filters setting. Okay, and I want a series or column filter. I'm going to choose multi-select, and what I want is to just show maybe a maximum of 10 of them. Okay, oh, I did a bit of a double click there, so let's just get that back into the right shape. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to do my columns B to JE. And there we go. There's my charts. And I could spend a lot of time doing this kind of properly, but that's not the point of today's exercise. I just want to show you this concept of controls and filters. Now I can publish this and hit publish, and that's going to be great. And I've now taken that quite big, quite interesting data set and made it completely explorable for my audience. So if I want to find maybe some countries that I'm interested in, like our near neighbors for the UK here in Europe. It's nice and simple and fast and easy. But you'll see that using this filter and set to a maximum of 10, we've achieved this kind of quite quirky effect. So we said only show a maximum of 10. So Flourish has just taken the first 10 in the list and is showing them. And this is a rather bizarre set of countries or regions to put alongside each other. On one hand, we've got Andorra, which obviously we can't see because it's buried all the way down here. And on another hand, the Arab world. So obviously a kind of regional conglomeration of countries. So that doesn't really make much sense. What we might want to do is actually just push this into a single slide story. So I'm just going to do create a story. Now I'm not actually doing a story in terms of sequencing multiple slides together. What I just want to do is use this series filter and the story player's ability to remember that state. I'm just going to turn off the navigation style to make sure that at least the first things that my audience are presented with is something sensible. And then probably within the chart, I would direct my audience to let them know that they can filter to find their own points of interest. Okay, so maybe it would look something more like that. Now when I publish to share and embed, to the audience, it just looks like a single standalone visualization, but leaning on the ability of the story player to pre-remember that filter, we can present consistent information and data to our audience. So hopefully a nice little sort of trick there. What I want to do next is just switch over to that same data and using it within a column chart example to show you an idea of how you could also use a row filter. So let me go back into my Flourish workspace here. For those that you don't know, when you work in stories, nice little trick is just to do right click with control and open in a new tab and go back to working on your visualization. Okay, so I wanted to change this. Let's filter it down to a few familiar countries so we have a better idea of what we're doing. Germany, Italy, Spain, France, and so on. And let's switch it over to a column chart. Maybe we're wanting to compare these countries a bit more closely. Okay, so already I can see the column chart visualization. This is pretty unhelpful. This is a bit of an overwhelming amount of data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to use now the ability to add a row filter. And I'm going to filter on the contents of this row. So instead, we're going to look at this on a year-on-year basis. There we go. Okay, and now I've got a little drop down and I can select from whatever year that I want. Nope. Doesn't look like we have data for 2020, there's 2019. Okay, so that lives here under controls and filters. You'll see that if I want, I can include all, but I'm not going to do that here. We've already seen that doesn't work well on this chart for all these years worth of data. Down here, we've got different control types that we can set. So here on our single drop down, I could switch to this buttons approach. Okay, this is not going to work at all here. I've got far too many options, so that's definitely not right. For playing through a timeline, maybe something like this option is a better one to present to your audience. And now they can use this time slider to pick the area of interest or even hit a play button. And as I do play, you'll see that this is actually really a little bit kind of jerky. So I want to take this opportunity to introduce you to some settings for animations down here. And you'll see that we've got these abilities to, and it's preset so that we only animate series with the same name and points with the same label. So the issue is here, this is changing. Flourish isn't seeing this as the same thing, so it's changing 1979, 1980, and so on. So if I just turn those off and now hit play, we should see we get a much smoother animation effect. And we'll cover those things in more depth when we look at line bar pie in story mode in another session. Okay, so adding a row filter, some different filter controls, tweaking animation settings. Now let's quickly look at example of how you can create grid of charts, which can be really useful if you really do feel like you have too much data to sort of present to the audience in the context of a single chart. It can make it a bit easier to see trends within these individual series. but as we're going to see, when you use it, you may need to sort of slim down your lines and dots from a styling point of view to help make things legible. So let me hop over and take a quick look at that again using this World Bank GDP data. So perhaps actually we don't have the luxury of showing only 5 countries data here, and we need to show maybe 15 or 16 countries as I've got here. And as we can see, this is not really all that great from a legibility point of view. Very hard to see what's really going on with these countries down the bottom, like New Zealand and Portugal. So what I'm going to do is break this into a grid of charts, and we should now see those open up, and it's a little bit clearer to see what's going on, and we can our eye can quickly scan lots of these in one go far more easily than on that single chart. As we can see now, these dots are rather thick, so I'm going to go down to my lines and dots area. That's determined by this dots radius that we see here. So instead of 0.25, I'm going to drop that down to something like 0.05. And then in just a sec, we see that update, and now these lines are a bit slimmer, more elegant, easier to see those little peaks and troughs. And courtesy of my colleague Lindsay, just another quick tip here, which is in these grid of charts visualizations, it can often be helpful to use this area chart unstacked to just fill in the area below the lines. And when we're looking at quite a lot of data, trying to pick out things very quickly, with this shaded, I think it's now a lot easier to see, for example, that Japan really is quite significantly higher than, say, Germany. It's also easier to pick out, for example, that these figures for Turkey are actually quite a lot higher than Sweden over the last sort of 10 to 15 years. And that is visually, I think, a little bit easier to see in this area chart unstacked mode. So another nice little sort of hidden feature with the grid of charts, which you may not be aware of, is we saw that you can use that for pie charts, but there's this extra little hidden setting here allowing you to scale pie charts within a grid of chart based on your total data. So let's just show you what that means. So here we're looking back at our energy data, and we're showing how that total output is made up proportionally across the different energy types for 1995, 1996, and 1997. So I'm just going to change my data here, and for 1997, I'm going to just have a little hack and change wind, solar, and hydro from 0.4 to 400.4, and we should now see that update. So there's that updating nicely. And because we've hacked this, this is now very sort of significantly higher. So that's all good. But what we can't tell from this is that the total amount for 1997 is now actually significantly larger than for 95 and 96. So that little setting lives here under segments, and you've got the option to scale pies based on data. And now we should see, there we go, they now closely represent the total data there. So hopefully a useful thing to be aware of if you're working with multiple pie charts. And then lastly, I wanted to introduce you to the ability to order your data within the line bar pie template. So this is a new option available for bar, column, and pie charts. You can see here we've got 3 modes of sorting, whether it's the data sheet, the value, or the label. So I'm just going to introduce you to a couple of examples here. So with this one, I think sorting by value makes most sense. So this is our energy output data. So I've started off with it set by the data sheet. So coal, petroleum, natural gas. So that ordering is just being derived from the order in which these are appearing in our data sheet. And in this instance, it's not sort of particularly meaningful. So I don't think I want to choose that. I could choose label, and that's going to put it in alphabetical order. So B, C, N, and so on. I could put it in reverse alphabetical order if I want. But I think for this data, putting it in value is going to make most sense, because now, as well as seeing the total amounts, I can also see the ranking of these various different fuel types. And if, for example, we just sort of slide along this a little bit, we'll see wind, solar, and hydro goes from least until coal drops down, and then now in more recent years, coal is the least, and wind and solar and hydro has overtaken it. So that's where we might want to use, say, sorting by value. But in this next example, I would say sorting by label, for example, makes more sense. So this is now some survey responses, and we've got various areas of business and whether our respondents see these areas as a challenge or not a challenge, and then different categories of respondents based on the business. Now, at the moment, we're sorting this by data sheet, but these categories in our data sheet aren't really ordered. So as I change around my views, what happens is these categories are now moving around. So it's really quite hard to follow what's what here and what's changing within our data because these are moving place. Now I could also maybe try doing that by value, but I get the same problem because these have different sort of priorities, and so the categories are moving around. So with something like this, I would say using sorting by label makes more sense. So this is now sorted in alphabetical order. This is reverse alphabetical order. So let's put that A to T. And now as I switch from, say, America to Asia, I would say that that point is a lot clearer, that our Asian businesses clearly see these things as a lot less of a challenge than our American respondents do. Okay, so that's it for today. A little bit of a whistle-stop tour, and you get an idea of why we've broken this template down into multiple sessions. Next week at the same time, we'll be taking a bit of a deeper dive into line charts. I hope my tea isn't too cold. I'd like to thank everybody for making it along today. I really hope it's been a very useful session for you. Please bear in mind, this is a brand new thing for us at Flourish to be delivering, so we would love to hear any thoughts and feedback you have. You can contact myself and any of the rest of the team via priority support at flourish.studio. If there are any questions that you felt weren't answered, let us know. If there's any feedback that you have on today's webinar, let us know. If there are things that you're keen to make sure we cover in forthcoming webinars on this template, again, let us know and we'll do all of that. But that aside, I hope that's been a useful way for you to spend your tea break. Thank you again very much for joining us all, and really look forward to seeing you all same time next week. Thanks, everyone.